Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Now in today's episode, we're going to be traveling back to the turn of the century to take a look at WinLinux 2000, a Linux distro designed for Windows users who were thinking about switching over to the dark side, that side that 90s Microsoft didn't want you to know about, filled with open source, free, and community supported software. Oh gosh, is there anything worse than that? Well yeah, if you were Microsoft in the 90s, there pretty much wasn't, but this was really a different time for Microsoft and the computing world as a whole, and with the ongoing antitrust case brought on by the US government, there was this shred of hope in the Linux community that, maybe Microsoft's days of enjoying the stronghold that they had on the operating system market were numbered. Maybe they were going to get broken up and that monopolistic power was going to go away and other operating systems would have a chance to make a substantial impact in the consumer market. Of course, as we all know, Microsoft never got broken up, and Windows continued to grow in market share, though it certainly faced a bit of a challenge from Mac OS, and Linux of course grew in market share as well, but none of them ever matched and still do not match Windows in the consumer desktop operating system space. So WinLinux 2000 was a product of this environment, and it was designed for Windows users who were curious about the Linux world and wanted to experience it without needing to read up on how to partition your drive and go through the text-based installation process, which could be extremely confusing for novice users who just went out and bought a Windows computer that came with it pre-installed. So WinLinux solves this problem by bringing the entire setup process for this operating system over to a Windows setup executable that installs just like any other Windows program. So if you had installed Microsoft Office, for example, you'd be able to install this with relative ease. It's very similar to how the Wooby installer, which would come years down the road, works, but WinLinux 2000 claimed to be the only Linux distro from this time period that would install in this way, within this Windows setup executable. So without any further ado, let's see how it works. Let's check it out. So we're going to eject the 98 PC's DVD drive right here. Of course, we are running Windows 98, a fresh install. In fact, look at that, I forgot to take out the driver disk. So we'll set that aside and we'll put in our WinLinux 2000 disk and we'll be on our way here. So it automatically starts the setup process right when you put the disk in. And yeah, as you can see, it looks just like any other Windows setup executable. So we're going to hit next here. We're going to hit next. It's going to check our hard drive for errors. And this is where you get to choose whether you want a compact, full, or a typical installation. We're going to go with full. And it's going to give you a little bit of a warning here that says WinLinux 2000 or WinLinux installs a new operating system and must be placed on a fixed drive. So it basically tells you don't install this on a removable drive because it may not be able to boot the system. And that's because you actually launch into WinLinux 2000 from Windows. There's no partitioning or anything done at all, and there's no boot manager. You still have to boot into Windows and then you launch WinLinux 2000 from there. If that sounds kind of confusing, I'll show you how that works once we get done with the install process here. So you have to make sure, this is very important, it says right here, it must be installed in the Linux directory. You can change the drive that it's installed on if you have like a secondary hard drive you want to install it to, but it must be installed in the Linux directory. I believe it has to be on the root of the drive as well, though it doesn't necessarily say that right here. So we're going to hit on next, and then here it just tells you what it's going to name itself. In the program folder, it's going to put everything in, and you hit next, and that's it for this first part. It goes right off and begins copying files from the CD over to your hard drive. Now, a couple things about this. This was completely free to download, just like a lot of other Linux distros, so you could get this for free, but it did cost $30 if you wanted to get a disc mailed to you, which is understandable if they're going to, make that up and ship it to you, so they did charge for that. And there were other versions of WinLinux released. The latest version was WinLinux 2003, which came out, well, sometime in 2003 or sometime in the early 2000s perhaps. I don't know if it was specifically 2003, but I would guess that from the name. And after that, things kind of went quiet in the WinLinux world. The website, winlinux.net, according to the copyright date, was last updated sometime in 2004, and it just kind of faded into obscurity after that, and the web archive, when you try to go to 2007, 2008, and beyond, it just doesn't really load anything. It's just like a blank page. And someone still owns the domain today, and there is a website hosted at winlinux.net. It's just somebody's extremely bare bones WordPress site with nothing on it. It's kind of bizarre, but hey, if someone still owns the domain, so that's cool. So yeah, that's WinLinux 2000. Oh, and also one of the major things is the UI was designed to kind of look like Windows, which was something that, you know, you would want as a Windows user migrating to Linux. It would be helpful to have an environment that looked similar. So the window borders and everything, the, you know, controls and stuff like that, the layout, they've tried to really mimic Windows as best that they could. It does run the K desktop environment, or KDE. So there's definitely still a learning curve. I mean, much less so with WinLinux 2000. The learning curve really only begins when you boot into the operating system, because, you know, there are major differences between Linux and Windows. I mean, Linux uses a completely different file system structure, so there's things that you're still going to have to know and to, you know, learn. But the best way in a lot of cases is just to experience it yourself, and that's what WinLinux 2000 was all about. It gave you easy access. It's just getting in the door. That's the big thing. If you can get in the door, you can figure out all that stuff later on, right? We're installing here, we're going to let it finish up, and I'll be right back with you guys. Alright, so we've just finished up that first portion of the installation, and it took about 15 to 20 minutes, which is pretty understandable for an entire operating system. There were a lot of files to copy over. So it's now going to launch the WinLinux 2000 configuration utility, and this is where things can get a little more confusing. Certainly not on this screen where it's asking you for your name, but it's going to get into some driver stuff, which could definitely, you know, confuse some people. But they've definitely tried to make it as simple as they possibly can. So we're going to put in our name here, and I'll just use Michael as my login. Password will do MJD super secure, and you have the option to use the same password for root if you want to. This is generally not a good practice. It's never a good practice to do this, but we're gonna do it anyways, because why not? And yeah, so right here is where it gets into the driver stuff. So it says your video card was not detected as a supported card, and WinLinux will be configured for standard VGA. This is not an optimal configuration since you're limited to only 16 colors. And right here is where you can go through and view the devices that it's detected, and more importantly, the devices that it did not detect. And you can change these settings if you want to. So for certain things like the video here, since it wasn't able to load a proper driver, it's going to force VGA just, you know, load this really basic driver and run it at 640 by 480, though I think we should be able to actually, yeah, it's loaded two different displays here, one 640 by 480 and one 800 by 600, so we should be able to change between those and hopefully get a little higher resolution than 640 by 480. But yeah, you can go through, make sure everything looks good, and when you're ready, you just hit next, and it says finishing configuration. Your system will now be configured to run WinLinux 2000 on your computer. And you'll notice you have a couple new icons on the desktop. Number one is the release notes text document, so you can open this up. This is the update from November 11th, 1999. You also have boot WinLinux 2000. This is what I was talking about before, because WinLinux 2000 does not partition your drive at all. So we're going to boot WinLinux 2000, and Windows will let us know that it's set to run in MS-DOS mode and cannot run while other programs are running. It will close all other programs. Yes, we wish to continue. It will log out of our Windows session and swap us to MS-DOS, and then begin to boot WinLinux 2000. And there we go. And we get a kernel panic. Isn't that exciting? Unable to mount root file system on 801. Oh boy. Okay, so yeah, this is something that you would definitely not want to experience. We're going to restart here, and we got to do some troubleshooting. Well, it turns out that the troubleshooting utility turns out to be a simple program here that you get to send a message to the developers. So that doesn't really help us now because, well, that development team isn't around anymore, so we're not going to be able to get help from them at all. But yeah, this is the program group that it creates in the start menu, and we can launch the configuration utility again if we want to. And okay, so we're in a bit of an interesting predicament here. I believe it's trying to mount on SDA1. That would seem to be the case judging from what we have here. If you run the WinLinux executable file in the C Linux WinLinux folder, it'll tell you how many hard drives you have and what the Linux system is going to try to mount that drive as. So it says SDA1 is C. But this is an IDE drive, and typically SDA is reserved for SCSI or SATA drives, not IDE. HDA is usually reserved for IDE. So I wonder if we can just go into, let's go to Programs here, WinLinux 2000, and go to the config utility here. And we're not going to bother changing the password configuration and all that. If you go to advanced here, there is this option to boot WinLinux from user-defined hard drive partition, e.g. dev SDA1. So we'll do dev HDA1 and hit OK. Or I guess you can't hit enter. Okay, we'll hit OK down here. Let's just look at these other boot parameters first. Oh, look at that. You can load some additional modules. Video capture card, iOmega zip drives, older iOmega zip drives. So that's pretty cool. So we'll hit OK. We'll hit next and finish. And let's try that. Let's see if this works. So yeah, if a novice user were to run into this, I mean, this is definitely not the most pleasant thing to deal with. Let's hope. Oh, it's 0301 now. Okay. Well, I wonder if maybe it's detecting HDA1 as the CD drive. In fact, I think the CD drive might be the primary. In fact, let's boot into the BIOS here. Yeah, the primary master is the CD-ROM drive. Yeah, I found this thread over on linuxquestions.org of somebody who is essentially in this same predicament, though they were just in 2002 when you would actually be wanting to use this, and they were using, oh, and check that out, they said they were using WinLinux 2003 and 2002, so that answers that question. Looks like it came out before 2003. I did find this really interesting article from Tech Republic from the year 2000 of somebody who also ran into the same problem and just gave up. He said, like, after a few tries of like restarting the computer and reinstalling WinLinux, like uninstalling it and going through the installation process again, they just gave up because they were so fed up with it. Okay, so it's interesting. I just noticed this. You see right up here, HDA, and then it's got the DVD-ROM drive, and then HDC. That's the hard drive. Yeah, maybe it's that simple. Maybe we just gotta change that to HTC, but I don't know why the program in Windows there is detecting it as SDA1. Well, yeah, this is certainly not really making my statement at the beginning of the video where it's like, oh, this is so easy. You know, you just install it like a program in Windows and it's all good. Yeah, it's not really living up to what we're actually dealing with here. HTC 1. Okay. There we go. That was it. It was as simple as that. Okay. So keep that in mind if you try to, of course, it is, you know, it's going to vary depending on what hardware you have, but if you were to try to do this and it gives you that kernel panic, and it says it cannot mount the root file system, it's probably because WinLinux is just trying to mount it on the wrong device. Now your computer runs WinLinux 2000, and here's the beautiful K desktop environment before it was called KDE. So we're gonna log in. Gosh, I love the root. Oh no, my mouse isn't working. So I do have a USB mouse, and it could be that the that the USB driver here is not loaded. My mouse is not working. Let me grab a PS2 mouse. Yay, there we go. So what I was saying before is I love the root user icon here. Like, this is looking pretty. This is a pretty great icon. But we're gonna log into my account here. And you can choose your session type. Is there anything other than KDE, or is KDE the only? Yes, KDE is the only thing. Okay, so we're gonna go. So as I mentioned earlier, it did not detect our display device that we have in here. So it didn't load a proper display driver, so that results in some pretty interesting graphical effects going on as we're moving windows around, which is unfortunate, but hey, we got the thing loaded. That's the most important thing. So let's see what version of KDE that we're rocking here. KDE desktop environment was written by the KDE team. Oh, there's no version number. Okay, I thought there'd be a version number in the About menu there. I guess not. About KFM, this is the K file manager. Okay, so that's version 1.167.2.21. One of the other things I'd mentioned before is that, yes, this does try to mimic the Windows UI as best as it can, and that is something that it touts on the website as well. So you've got a similar color scheme, even a similar gradient up here, this blue to black gradient that you would find in Windows 98 or 495 by default. So it's little things like that that just make this feel a little bit more familiar to a Windows user. The menu down here, if you click on this, you've got all your application groups up here, your search function, go to the home directory, help information, refresh the desktop, open up the trash can. Let's go and see what we have installed. So let's go to applications here. So we do have Netscape. This was one of the things mentioned on the website as well. I would suspect kind of a middle finger to Microsoft because, you know, Microsoft was definitely trying to get rid of Netscape. They did not like Netscape at all. And Internet Explorer, basically, with them bundling IE with Windows, essentially killed Netscape. I mean, I've done a whole video on that, but yeah, that's that's the short version of it. And it looks like this is Communicator version 4.7. So yeah, if you would use Netscape Communicator on Windows, well, you'd feel right at home because the UI is essentially exactly the same. All right, so let's see what else we got here. So we took a look at Netscape. We do have GIMP if you want to open up GIMP and really explore that. We did that in the PlayStation 2 video. I guess it's kind of a rule. If there's a GIMP installation on a Linux distro that you install, you have to take a look at it. So let's see what version this is. I'm going to guess, I mean, it's definitely an early version here. Check out this aesthetic, man, in this boot screen or this startup splash screen here. The GNU Image Manipulation platform. Oh, yeah, that's really, really fancy how they changed the color of the text there. Oh, man. So let's see, GIMP tip of the day. The GIMP uses layers to let you organize your image. Think of them as a stack of slides or filters. Awesome. Okay, so we'll close out of that. And let's see here. Let's do a new document. 256 by 256, that's fine. We'll use all the default settings. And let's grab our pen tool here. Let's make this a nice, like, blue. And, you know, write out, let's see, M. It's a really bad looking M there. J, D. Oh, isn't that so beautiful? Okay. And then we'll maybe change this to like a yellow and do that. And let's call this amazing.jpg. And there we go. Beautiful. It's been saved. So yeah, gotta always use GIMP. I mean, we're just having fun at this point, man. We're just messing around with this because it's always cool to explore an operating system like this for the first time. So one thing that is worth mentioning is how it has laid out your file structure on here. So you've got this My HD icon on the desktop, which will open up the root directory, or what the system sees as the root directory, which in this case is the Linux folder on your hard drive, on your C drive back in Windows, right? You had that Linux folder. So just like we did on Windows, we can go into the WinLinux directory and we can see that linux.bat and the winlinux.exe and the .bat file down here. But you also got this DOS folder here, and this gives you access to your Windows files. So you've got my documents and program files here. So I can go into program files. We got Norton right here. This is where Norton antivirus lives if you really wanted to. Well, I mean, you're not going to be able to launch it on Linux, but, you know, there it is if you wanted to view those files. And yeah, so, you know, you can still get access to your files on the Windows side of things, which is definitely very useful. You've also got a shortcut to that DOS folder right here on the desktop. You've also got a floppy shortcut right here, which we don't have anything in the floppy disk drive right now, so it's not going to do anything. You got a CD-ROM shortcut as well. You've got MP3 player. What is this? Doesn't show up ultra well. The X Multimedia System, XMMS. Okay. I personally have not used this before. Unfortunately, it does not show up really well because it's running in 16 colors here, and that does not look the greatest. Again, freaking graphics driver, man. I wish we had something that we could load here other than this just generic one that's limited to 16 colors. We can go to display properties, though, and here we are. So this is where you can change the, oh gosh, that's looking really great, isn't it? We can change the wallpaper if we want to. Let's browse here and see what wallpapers we got. Let's go with circuit. That sounds intriguing. Oh yeah, it looks like a cool wallpaper. Unfortunately, it just doesn't. You know what? This actually looks kind of neat. I mean, yeah, they're all gonna be just not displaying the greatest, but let's go. I'm just gonna hold the down arrow key and then I'm just gonna stop on a random one while looking away. 1, 2, 3, stop. And we're still going. Still going. Okay. I think we looped back to the top here. Yeah, maybe I should not have held on the down arrow key for that long because we are... It's still scrolling through. Yeah, it's got a lot of keystrokes to catch up to. Man, this is, it's really going down this list here. Okay, Pebbletown. Boom. That works for me. There we go. So there's Pebbletown, but I didn't mean to close out of that. Let's go back into display properties. You can set multiple desktop wallpapers for your different desktops if you wanted to do that. So on desktop 2, for example, right now I don't have a wallpaper. I could set one if I wanted to. Let's go to screensaver here. Yeah, see this right here, I mean, this is giving me a real Windows vibe. I mean, just the way this is laid out. I mean, the background, yeah, this is substantially different, but screensaver, this is pretty dang close. There you have it. So let's see. Oh, flame, this looks nice. Let's see how you think, this is going to preview all right? This is probably going to be a mess. No, this looks pretty nice. Yeah, that's a neat little screensaver. So colors, you can change the color scheme if you want to. Fonts, style. Couple other things of note. You've got free Civ on here, so if you wanted to play around to that, there you go. You've got what appears to be Acrobat Reader. This looks like your help information here, which, oh my gosh, I did not want to do that. Oof. Yeah. That, that was not, oh, that's probably because Acrobat's, opened up there, because Netscape did the same thing. Yeah, so when you open up Netscape, it actually, I mean, again, improper display driver, that's, again, a very, very common theme here. I think you have to connect to a server, so we got to start up this here. This is the free Civ server, and there we go. Now we can connect. And there I've joined the game. What nation will you be? Let us see. So I have never played Free Civ before, but if you knew how to play it, well, you could have a lot of fun here. I'm probably gonna get down a bit of a rabbit hole here, so we'll just close this for now. But yeah, Free Civ. You got Free Civ on here. You've got, this is Netscape Messenger, ton of games here. I mean, look at all these games. Poker, Reversey, Smiletris. Oh, this is kind of like Tetris, isn't it? I think it's just like a free clone of it. I mean, not a literal, like they cloned the code, but you know what I mean. Let's do a new game here. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Now, this is a game I could play for hours. And, oh, I held down the key again. Like, I'm just holding down the... and now I've let go. And it's like, oh my, it's actually like freaking out. Like, look at that. That's like a bit of a glitch. It's like, I'm just holding down the key to change it. And it's actually preventing the block from continuing down. Now I've let go because I done all those key presses. It's just doing them. It's just going through them until it's done. And the block is stuck in midair, which is great. And I literally can't, like, I can't move it to the left or the right. So there's a bit of a tactic you'd use to your advantage in Smiletris here. It's still going. It's still... Oh my gosh. Oh, now it's doing my left and right. There we go. Okay, we're done. Now, one thing I want to do before we get out of here is let's log out of our session here. And let's go back to our login screen. And we're going to shut this down. So we'll go to shutdown. We will shut down, and this will power down the system. Like, it's not just going to quit out of this and go back to Windows. So I'm just going to press Control-Alt-Delete to restart, and we will just boot back up into Windows 98. And that pretty much, that wraps it up for this video, guys. That is a look at WinLinux 2000 in all of its glory. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, get subscribed down below, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. And as always, guys, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.